Hello, everybody. I hope you can see me and hear me. Take a good look. I know what some of you are thinking. When Mr. Gillam comes to our school, he normally has a tie and a shirt and he looks quite smart. But that doesn't look like that today. In fact, what a strange shirt he's wearing. In fact, this is all part of our story, and I'll explain that to you as I share my screen. You see, what happened was this. This time last year in January, I was able to go to Burkina Faso. And in Burkina Faso, um, I was able to visit the main city, which is called Ouagadougou. You can see that in the center of the map. In Ouagadougou on the Sunday, I was very privileged to be able to give the main message at the church. It's a very big church. They told me there were between 500 and 600 people in the church and lots of people outside listening with loudspeakers. The service went on for 2 hours from 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock. It was all in French. Unfortunately, my French is not very good. So somebody had to translate the message that I gave into French for me so that everybody could understand. It's a very unusual church. I'd never been in a church quite like it because when you went in, you had to go through a metal detector. The reason for this is that unfortunately, Burkina Faso is a very troubled country. There's a lot of terrorism, and some of the terrorists have attacked people in their churches. So as they go in, you go through a metal detector to make sure that nobody has brought a gun into the church. When the service was finished, a lady came up to me with a big parcel. She had been most kind, and I was able to pay her for what she had done. Earlier in the week, she had said, if you want any washing doing, I'll do it for you. It's a very hot time in January in Burkina Faso, and I changed my shirt at least once every day. So I had a heap of dirty shirts, and she washed them and ironed them and made them look really nice. When I got back to the place where I was staying, I looked in the packet and there was an extra shirt. And what I discovered this lady had done was she'd taken one of my shirts, used it as a pattern, and made me a new African shirt. And that's what I'm wearing today. It's the only shirt like this in the whole world. Some of you may look at it and think, I'd love to have a shirt like that. You might be very envious. I guess others of you would probably say, you'd have to pay me to wear a shirt like that. Well, be that as it may, whether you feel envious or not, I'm so proud of my shirt, which I wear on very special occasions. Look at this boy sitting on the side there. He's not happy. And the reason he's not happy is this: his girlfriend is spending more time talking to his mate than to him. And he's thinking, I wish he'd go away. I wish he'd stop talking to my girlfriend. He's beginning to feel quite jealous. And that's the topic that we're thinking about, especially today. And we're going to do so in thinking about the story of Joseph. Joseph lived in the land of Canaan. That's the land that today we call Israel. It's the land where Jesus lived. Joseph's family were herdsmen. There's a lot of country that's only suitable in Canaan for sheep and goats, possibly camels. And his family lived in tents and moved from place to place where they could find pasture for their sheep and their goats. His father was called Jacob, and his mother was called Rachel. Sadly, she had died some years ago, and so Jacob had no living mother. Joseph had no living mother. He was about 17 when this story happened, and he had 11 brothers. Some of you might think that would be great to have 11 brothers. We'd have our own football team for a start. But actually, it caused quite a lot of problems in the family. Partly, I think, because Jacob had had 4 wives. So these boys were not all proper brothers in the same way that we have in some families. Here they are. You can see their tents, and that's the country that they lived in as a family. It's a very big family indeed, wasn't it? Joseph and his brothers looked after the sheep. And sometimes they were away from their father, and his brothers started chatting and plotting things. They started to think, let's think about that. And when Joseph heard, he thought they shouldn't be doing that. And instead of keeping that to himself, or even saying to his brothers, you shouldn't do that, he went and told tales about his brothers. He went to his father Jacob and he said, do you know what they're plotting? They're going to do something. Jacob was not pleased at all. He told his brothers, his sons off, Joseph's brothers, and he said to Joseph, thank you for telling me, but don't keep telling me about what they're doing, because it only gets them upset and they only get angry with you. One day, Jacob said to Joseph, I've got something special for you. And he produced this wonderfully colored coat. We sometimes refer to it as Joseph's amazing Technicolor coat, and it certainly was very special indeed. That's why I wore my special African shirt today, because that's special, and it reminded me of Joseph's special cloak. If you look at the others, his other brothers, you will see how herdsmen in those days dressed. And Joseph's coat was going to be so different from his brothers. In fact, he was wearing a cloak that probably would be worn by a prince in a palace rather than somebody who looked after sheep and goats. But when Joseph put it on, he thought, this is great. And he went about strutting around saying, look at my cloak, everybody. Look what my dad has given me. I'm sorry to say that Jacob was really using Joseph as his favorite. And maybe that caused quite a lot of tension. And quite understandably, he should have given the same cloak to all of his sons, but he didn't. He just chose Joseph as his favorite. And Joseph didn't help matters by strutting around and feeling so proud in his new multicolored cloak. He kept on showing it off whenever he could to everybody who saw it. One night, Joseph had a dream. We often have dreams, don't we? Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. In those days, they believed that if you had a dream, it meant something special. Maybe God was saying something to you in your dream. And this was a very strange dream that Joseph had. He believed that he was in the harvest field and he and his brothers were doing the harvest. Well, of course, in those days, there were no machines like we have today. They had to cut the corn and bind it together in a sheaf. And each of them had a sheaf. But Joseph's sheaf seemed to be bigger than all the others, and it stood in the middle of the other sheaves. And the sheaves all started to bend down and bow down to Joseph's main sheaf. And when Joseph saw that, and when he woke up and told his brothers what he had dreamed, they got even more angry with him. They didn't like him because he told tales about them, and they certainly didn't like him because he'd been chosen by his father to have this special cloak. But now he was saying that one day he believed they would actually bow down to him. We shall never do it, they said. Why should you rule over us? Why should you be more important than us? We're never, ever going to bow down to you. Well, they did hate him, says the Bible, because of his dream. One night, Joseph had another dream. This time, he wasn't in the harvest field. Instead, he was in the heavens. He was amongst the stars. There were 12 stars. There was the moon and the sun, and he seemed to be in the middle. And all the stars and the sun and the moon were bowing down to him again. When he woke up, he thought about the dream, and then he told his brothers. He said, I had another dream, and this time you were all stars. They thought, that's good. And my mum was there. She was like a moon. And my dad was there. He was like the sun. And all of you, sun and moon and all the stars, bowed down to my star, which was far, far bigger and brighter than any of yours. Do you think they were pleased to hear that dream? Do you think they said, well, that's a good dream, Joseph. We're so pleased you told us about it. No, they got even angrier. Never, ever will we do this. Why should you be more important than us and reign over us, they said. And they hated Joseph even more because of his dream. He told his father, and his father wasn't too pleased. He said, will we bow down? Will I bow down to you? How can that be? He couldn't understand it. But Joseph said, well, that's what I dreamed. Maybe God is telling us something. Well, when you think about that story, we can learn this. His brothers were very jealous of him. That's exactly the words of the Bible. And so I thought we ought to consider some questions. And I used the word mistake. First of all, what mistake did Jacob make? And I think when you have listened to the story, you will soon discover what Jacob did that didn't help the family to be more friendly and kindly towards each other, but caused a lot of tension and bad feeling. And the second question, what mistakes did the brothers make? I used the word mistakes purposely because it was more than one mistake, I think. There were several, and we can understand to a certain extent how they felt. But maybe they were too angry because of the things that Joseph had said and done. Can you think of some mistakes that the brothers made? And then finally, I don't think Joseph was a perfect son by any means or a perfect brother. In fact, he made at least one mistake and maybe more in the way that he treated his brothers and the way that he spoke to them about the dreams especially. There are lessons we can learn, aren't there? It's very easy for us to be proud because of something we've got that nobody else has got, or proud because we can do something that nobody else can do, and we make a big show of that. Pride is not a good thing when it's done like that, though sometimes you've got every right to be proud when you've really done a good piece of work and you've been commended for what you've done. But I think too, the problem is sometimes we are envious of people who have things that we don't have, or can do things that we can't do, or have been places that we shall never go to. And maybe we get envious or jealous of them. But as somebody rightly said, when this happens, we should think of all the good things about our lives, the things that we can do, and the things that we have. When Jesus was here, he made it very clear by his words and by his behavior that pride was not a good thing. And he certainly was never jealous, and he condemned those who showed jealousy to one another. So here's a thought. Note to self. Don't get jealous. And maybe we will feel a bit jealous sometimes and a bit envious. Maybe we just need to stop and think to ourselves, no, not a good thing, because jealousy often leads to bad feeling, sometimes to difficulties, sometimes even to tears. Thank you for listening. There's another part to the Joseph story that I'll try and bring to you as soon as I possibly can.